in the September 24th, 1920 edition of the Omaha Daily Bee, specifically the What Do You Know About the Sporting World section, a question was asked as whether Jack Dempsey had ever boxed Tommy Gibbons. At that time, of course, the answer was no. That said, this was a premonition for a fight that, while not entirely on the radar at the time, would be one that came to fruition. Now, when the fight ultimately did happen, one town found out the meaning of prize fighting the hard way. Welcome to 86 Boxing. We cover boxing history and the great stories of the warriors of the past. Do us a favor, like, subscribe, turn on the notifications because we will be coming with more. Thank you. William Harrison Dempsey, known to the world as Jack Dempsey, is one of the greatest heavyweights in boxing history. He reached an iconic status as arguably the most popular athlete ever at his peak. Dubbed the Manasseh Mauler, Jack Dempsey's career spanned from 1914 to 1927. Dempsey helped usher in boxing's first $1 million gate against George Carpentier on July 2nd, 1921 at Boyle's 30 Acres in Jersey City, New Jersey. There were more than 80,000 fans in attendance, and the fight generated $1,789,238 with tickets priced from $5.50 up to $50. This fight gave Dempsey what was his highest payday thus far in his career. Again, back to 1920, on December 11th, it was reported that Tex Ricker's assistant at Thatcher was hotly pursuing a matchup between Jack Dempsey and Tommy Gibbons of St. Paul, Minnesota. Gibbons was one of the greatest light heavyweights in history and fairly formidable in the heavyweight ranks as well. When you hear someone call a fighter underrated, Tommy Gibbons most certainly fits that bill. His older brother, Mike Gibbons, was one of the greatest middleweights in boxing history, so he's essentially a part of a fighting family. Tommy, to this point, had been in the ring with all-time great world champions such as Harry Greb, George Chip, and Battling Levitsky, to name a few. Noted for solid footwork and defense, Gibbons was technically sound in the ring, and his abilities in part made him a justifiable foe for Dempsey. The same could be said of Harry Greb, but we'll save that for another video. Back in July 1921, in the aftermath of the Carpentier victory, articles were immediately penned calling for Gibbons to be the next Dempsey opponent, as it seemed to be the logical choice. Then world featherweight champion Johnny Kilbane even wrote an article suggesting such, having been ringside for Dempsey versus Carpentier. On July 15th in Chicago, Illinois, fresh out of a stint in Leavenworth Penitentiary, former world heavyweight champion Jack Johnson even let it be known that he was willing to face Dempsey, stating, "I want a chance to fight Jack Dempsey. Half of the proceeds go to the wounded soldiers. If Dempsey's end is not enough, I'll give him mine." On July 23rd, Tommy Gibbons wrote a customary article for the Evening Journal and, among other things, spoke on Dempsey versus Carpentier in the contest and how he would build himself up to be ready for Dempsey, alluding to Carpentier not having enough time to put on proper weight to take on such a challenge. In the February 13th, 1922 edition of the Ogden Standard Examiner, Billy Evans penned a piece titled, "Who Should Meet Jack Dempsey? Fans to Decide." In the article, Evans highlighted 6 fighters who were in the running to face Dempsey next for the world heavyweight title. The opponents were Tommy Gibbons, who had scored 24 knockouts in 25 bouts at this time, Bill Brennan, who had twice fought Dempsey, with the last fight being a 12th round knockout loss to Dempsey on December 14th, 1920, with the title at stake, There was also Captain Bob Roper, who sported a win over Bill Brennan and a loss to Tommy Gibbons, both in 1920. There was Bob Martin, the Ohio State heavyweight champion, who'd gone 1-2-1 with Bob Roper in previous bouts. Then it was Bartley Madden, who shared the ring with Gibbons, Brennan, and Roper at the time, though mainly coming up short in several bouts. Lastly, the Black Panther Harry Wills, who was the colored world heavyweight champion at the time and was considered to be the best heavyweight in the world next to Dempsey and thought to have the physical edge. The article then called for fans to decide who Dempsey would face next by filling in a blank form that was included with the newspaper with an X next to the name of their choice and mailing it back to the sports editor for the Standard Examiner. The ballot would have to be received by February 20th. The poll was a nationwide referendum with cooperation from hundreds of newspapers. It also noted that Dempsey's manager, Jack Kearns, was seeking a contest that the public was greatly interested in as they sought the biggest purse possible. On March 22, 1922, Harry Greb wrote an article providing details on why he felt he could outbox Dempsey. Having defeated Tommy Gibbons, Greb was regarded by many as a legitimate challenge to the heavyweight world champion. Regardless of such, the chatter seemed to still favor Tommy Gibbons as the eventual next opponent for Jack Dempsey. On May 6, there was a report noting that there were some who assumed Gibbons was younger than Dempsey and a new hotshot in the ranks, when in actuality, Gibbons was the older fighter. By November 1st, word out of New York was that Dempsey and Gibbons would meet based on the words of famed promoter Tex Rickard, who saw Gibbons as the logical opponent. On November 16th, Tex was quoted as stating the following with regards to Gibbons: "I think that Gibbons is a great fighter. Furthermore, I think he is the greatest light heavyweight in the world. Gibbons is big enough to tackle any fighter in the ring today, and if everything could be arranged satisfactorily to all principals concerned, I would be glad to stage a battle between Gibbons and the champion. If I can't get that match, I would like to have Gibbons and Greb for a return bout, or Gibbons against Gene Tunney. Yes, indeed, I think that Gibbons would make a worthy opponent for Mr. Dempsey and hope that such a match can be arranged." On December 22nd, in his hometown of St. Paul, Minnesota, Tommy Gibbons himself was quoted as stating, "If Dempsey can be induced to enter the ring with me, there will be no squabble over terms, so as far as I'm concerned, any date suits me. All that is necessary is to get Dempsey's signature." Sights were then set on this matchup, and it would be an unlikely town to stake their claim as the premier location. This was none other than Shelby, Montana. It should be noted that Tommy Gibbons continued to fight, and in 1922, he took on Harry Greb in addition to 2 fights with Billy Misk, among several other notable contenders. Dempsey remained outside of the ring, cashing in on his fame and glory as the most popular figure in sports. Shelby, Montana is a small town located in the north-central part of Montana. In 1922, oil was discovered near the area, which sent the town into a frenzy as an influx of hopeful oil barons flocked to the town. To put things into perspective, the 1920 census recorded a population of just 527 residents, so the thought of Shelby hosting any fight, let alone one of the magnitude of the World Heavyweight Championship bout in the Roaring '20s, wasn't even a thought until it was. The aim was July 4th, 1923 in Shelby. The plans would be for an arena to be built specifically for the contest. Dempsey was guaranteed a staggering $250,000, while Gibbons was set to take home $50,000. This gives a glimpse of the type of purse Dempsey commanded. For more details on how he got there, check out our video on the channel that dives into the intricate details of his $1 million gate bout with Carpentier. On March 3rd, 1923, A report out of Helena, Montana stated that the town of Shelby was prepared to provide the $100,000 required as the first deposit, and that all that awaited was approval on the fight, which was at the stead of the Montana Attorney General. On March 15th, reporting out of Billings, Montana noted that the night before, Shelby officials had raised $55,000 in cash, along with receiving other pledges for cash to be provided by oilmen from the area to boost their intent on hosting the contest. The pledges would bring the total to $200,000 if commitments were kept. On March 16th, the Billings Gazette reported that the Montana State American Legion, in conjunction with the Toole County Post, would manage the fight proceedings. They noted that the intent was for the profits from the gate to be donated to disabled soldiers from Montana. They also stated that applications for thousands of tickets had already been received by the ticketing department. Minneapolis sports promoter Mike Collins, who was brought in to assist the American Legion, predicted a record-breaking gate with the possibility of a $1 million gate. It doesn't stop there, as representatives from Canada who were present at the time of the meeting promised an attendance of 10 to 20,000 fight patrons from Alberta alone. To say that the predictions were at a high would be an understatement. On this same day in New York, Doc Kearns quelled the notion that Dempsey had received a $750,000 fight offer to fight Luis Angel Firpo in a rematch in Argentina. Jump to March 24th, and it was noted that former professional boxer turned promoter out of Cleveland, Tommy McGinty, had offered $100,000 to stage the Dempsey Gibbons bout on July 4th, 1923 in Cleveland. Word also came out that the New York State Athletic Commission had barred the fight from happening in New York on the grounds of Gibbons being too light. On March 31st, the Attorney General for Montana ruled that the Dempsey-Gibbons bout proposed for Shelby, Montana, did not break Montana laws, essentially providing a green light. Additionally, there was still a bit of uncertainty as Kearns had multiple offers and neither fighter had officially signed articles. The American Legion at this point had guaranteed $200,000 to Dempsey, $50,000 for Gibbons. It was reported that they had $75,000 in cash deposited in the Great Falls and Shelby banks, along with another $35,000 in negotiable pledges to put up the $110,000 forfeiture asked by the two fighters. All that would be needed now was the two fighters' signatures, for which Mike Collins was on the job. On April 7th, it was reported out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, that Mike Collins had received all signatures, Tommy Gibbons included, had all money in place, and all that awaited was the signature of the world heavyweight champion, Jack Dempsey. Now, at this stage, the particulars were as follows. Tommy Gibbons would receive $50,000 for the contest. Jack Dempsey would receive $50,000 as soon as he signed articles. Another $50,000 would be posted in any bank Dempsey suggested as forfeit. The remaining $100,000 would be paid to Dempsey 24 hours before going into the first round, meaning that Dempsey would have received $150,000 before even stepping through the ropes. Mike Collins also declared that as far as location, no better place could be found other than Shelby. He felt that Tommy Gibbons would draw well from the Dakotas, Nebraska, Minnesota, and as far east as Chicago, while Jack Dempsey, being from the West, would pack in fans from Utah, Nevada, Colorado, Idaho, and California. At this point, he believed the fight would draw over $500,000 and more than $300,000 would be paid out for the tickets by Montana fans. The price for the tickets were expected to range from $20 to $50. Now, on April 10th, 1923, which was a Tuesday, the state commander representing the 120 American legions tied to the fight, Lloyd J. Mullenby, announced that Doc Kearns would have until the following Saturday to answer as to whether they would accept the fight. On April 12th, Mike Collins, along with Tommy Gibbons' manager Eddie Kane, headed to Salt Lake City, Utah to meet with Doc Kearns in order to obtain an acceptance or rejection for the fight. On April 18th, it was reported that Eddie Kane stated that all terms of the fight had been accepted and only the signatures of the principals was all that remained and was regarded as a formality. During their Utah meeting, Doc Kearns agreed to meet Kane and representatives of the Shelby Post of the American Legion in Great Falls, Montana, within 4 or 5 days to sign articles. In a supplementary statement, Mike Collins noted that the fight would be held in a natural amphitheater 1 mile west of Shelby. The seating capacity would be 40,000 and construction work would proceed immediately after signing of the articles. Interestingly, neither Collins or Kane stated what the terms between the two fighters were, but it was reported from other reliable sources that Jack Dempsey would receive $300,000 for his end of the purse. Adjusted for inflation, $5.5 million in 2025, a staggering sum for the time. Over the next couple of weeks, varying reports would drop, ranging from Doc Kearns stating negotiations were still ongoing to 15 of the 127 Montana American Legion posts disapproving of the fight taking place. The opposition grew as the days went on, as State Adjutant O.C. Lamport was vehemently against the contest. Despite such, on April 30th, tickets went on sale in Montana. The projected site had an interesting backstory in that it was the location where, in April of 1886, the Braves of the Blackfeet and the Sioux tribes met in what was the last tribal war in the state of Montana, with the two tribes fighting hand-to-hand with tomahawks and knives. A report on May 7th said that the terms of the agreement between Dempsey and Gibbons was that Dempsey would receive $310,000 guaranteed, and Gibbons would receive 50% of all receipts in excess of $310,000, not to exceed $600,000. On May 10th, it was reported that there was a rush to erect the arena for the contest, with 100 carloads of lumber having been ordered and another 100 carloads to follow. On May 15th, it was reported that a labor strike for the arena failed, aimed at increasing pay, with only one man quitting. By early June, there was a feeling that Dempsey was taking his training for Gibbons lightly, according to those who had witnessed him in Toledo when he faced Willard. Meanwhile, Tommy was guided by his brother Mike. With new executives in charge of the fight, on June 17th, it was noted that Doc Kearns was a happy man, having received the second installment of the $100,000. This indeed solidified the fight, and the July 4th date being the aim. The payment was made by George H. Stanton, president of the Stanton Trust and Savings Bank. Hotel owner and mining operator Dan Tracy was the new man selected to oversee the fight, with assistance from Fred R. Searles, former assistant cashier at the Great Falls National Bank, serving as the assistant treasurer for the bout. The original executives remained in place, but now reported to Dan Tracy. Around 2 weeks from the fight, it was reported on June 20th that the arena was all but complete, with the main focus now being on selecting the preliminary bout fights. It was noted that 25 fire marshals and a cowboy patrol force would be on duty during the event. They also staged a medical tent holding 25 cots for the contest. Additionally, the team was also wrapping up plans for establishing a 157-acre tourist automobile camp which would hold 3,000 cars given the influx of fans expected for the fights. The two fighters continued to step up the training, with positive words being shared regarding both camps. While the majority of pundits felt that Dempsey would be too much for Gibbons, there were those who gave the edge to Tommy given his boxing ability, likening this matchup to that of Jim Corbett taking on John L. Sullivan for the World Heavyweight title back in 1892. On June 30th, George Stanton reported that there would be no changes to the fight and it would go on as scheduled. He also noted that he had received pledges from 20 wealthy Montanans, which would cover the last installment of $100,000 Dempsey was to receive. Stanton noted that Dempsey's team would receive the money the coming Monday, July 2nd. The funding still hadn't been collected, and on July 3rd, around 12:30 a.m., it was reported that the fight was off. In a room crowded with media, Stanton and Doc Kearns got into an angry argument after Stanton told Kearns the final $100,000 was not available and he saw no prospect of raising it. Stanton noted that Dempsey ought to go ahead and fight considering he had already been paid $210,000 and that it was cruel to Gibbons for them not to fight based on the $100,000 condition. Kearns stated that he would take $50,000 in cash right then and collect the other $50,000 from the gate receipts. Stanton noted that he did not have $50,000 in cash and that the $5,000 pledges from the Montana businessmen who had attempted to raise the money had been returned. After several hours of back and forth and the fight being on and off, around 2:45 a.m., all parties came to an agreement. Due to an inability to collect the last installment, Doc Kearns agreed to let the fight proceed so as long as all preliminary costs were provided. It was also agreed that Doc Kearns would have jurisdiction over all gate receipts until the $100,000 was collected, with whatever remaining going to the promoters. In the midst of this, a train carrying around 80 or so fight fans who were to attend the fight had been delayed. This was a result of the fight not being definitively agreed on. It was noted that this, along with other delays, resulted in some fans not traveling to the fight. Still, on the eve of the fight, it was reported that there were a number of people in Shelby, though it wasn't anywhere near the 40,000 expected. Given that this was a world heavyweight title match, it was viewed as having the makings of the most colossal bust in the history of failures. Alas, the day was finally here. On July 4th, 1923, Jack Dempsey would defend his world heavyweight title against Tommy Gibbons. One headline read, "Champion loses reputation as man killer, while challenger shows he has little chance of damaging the champion." The fight would ultimately be ruled a decision victory for Dempsey by the referee. It was noted that Dempsey's time being idle and not fighting could have attributed to his inability to stop Gibbons, as many didn't expect Gibbons to go past 7 rounds. Gibbons showed great skill, but Dempsey was the aggressor and almost had Gibbons out at the end of the 15th round. There were even suggestions that a rematch was in store. Financially, the fight was a disaster, with it being estimated that Shelby, Montana would be in the hole over $100,000. The gate receipts were expected to not even reach half of what Dempsey was paid. The view was that this would put a stain on big fight purse guarantees, as there had been other situations around the country suffering a similar fate. In the end, only 7,202 fans paid to see the contest, which garnered a gate of $207,485,000. The amphitheater for which Dempsey fought was estimated to have cost $25,000, and an additional $22,448.50 had to be paid out for taxes. Several thousand people stormed the gate, blocking off the amphitheater minutes before the first fight, which swelled the audience to around 25,000, though their presence did not show in the gate receipts. The potential earnings for Dempsey was cut to under $262,000. Doc Kearns collected only $52,000 of the final $100,000 installment. With that funding, he paid out $1,000 for the preliminary bouts. Another $73,000 was paid in taxes. The preliminary bout between Jim Delaney and Jack Burke was canceled due to lack of funding. The crowd was subjected to a prolonged delay when matchmaker Michael Collins refused to allow the title bout to proceed until funding for the preliminary bouts and the referee was presented. This resulted in a heated argument between Kearns, Lane, and Collins at the ticket office until a personal check was provided by the treasurer for the contest, Mayor James Johnson. Tommy Gibbons walked away with nothing for his purse, as his agreement was to receive 50% of the gate receipts in excess of $310,000 guaranteed for Dempsey. Gibbons wasn't completely barren of profit, as he was paid $5,000 by the town of Shelby for training expenses between $100 and $400 a day for his 3-week training camp, and another $5,000 for a tour of the state, which immediately preceded the bout. In the aftermath, Shelby as a town was nearly bankrupted. 4 banks ended up closing, including that of George Stanton's in Great Falls and 2 in Shelby, one being that of the mayor, James Johnson. Shelby would take years to rebound from this huge loss associated with the Dempsey-Gibbons bout. Let this be a cautionary tale of taking on too much at once. One question you may be asking is whether the debacle was on Dempsey's inability to draw fans to Montana, or was it just that Montana wouldn't have drawn the expected gate regardless? For what it's worth, Dempsey would go on to have other million-dollar gates. As for Shelby, it's still not quite that fight town that it was expected to become. Thanks for watching.